Welcome to the SCPI Boys Basketball Week 2 Playoff Podcast. Connor Morissette, Keith DeMolder here in a parking garage at USC. Unfortunately, it was a little bit too windy at our usual spot, so we couldn't do it with a nice background of Los Angeles. So sorry about the backdrop, but you still have us, all the good information, that the good analysis that you come for. So, Keith, crazy week in City Section basketball last week. I mean, sticking with the open division to start, every game was close, it seemed like. I mean, Westchester pulled away from Birmingham eventually, but besides that, every game was really tight, and what a great Saturday night that was.
Fantastic performances from even the teams that lost. The fact that they were able to go up on some of these top teams. We saw ECR, go up in that game, and they didn't pull away with the W, but ultimately great performances. Also a couple of upsets in the lower divisions, but not as many as we're usually used to.
All right, so a couple takeaways from last week. So where we'll start today and then give out a game ball and finish off with some picks. So first takeaway for me, I picked against Granada Hills in the open division, and I picked against Palisades in Division 1, and I think you did as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so first and foremost, sorry to those teams, and I was able to talk to some players from Palisades and interact with some Granada fans on Twitter. I didn't give them enough credit. I didn't think that they were going to be able to win those games, and they proved me wrong. So congrats to them. They're going to move on to the next round where they'll each play the number 1 seeds in their respective tournaments. So it's not going to get any easier for them. But congratulations to them. I feel like we slighted them, but they proved us wrong.
Yeah, their whole computer method, I guess, came out on top in that one. But they'll have a big test this week against a very good Westchester team. So you got to wonder, folks, is it the system? Is it the pace of play, the team atmosphere, or is it the big guys? And we'll see. Maybe Zelly Hudson will have another huge game against Granada.
Yeah, Palisades beat Dorsey at Dorsey, and Granada Hills beat Narbonne at Narbonne. 2 very nice upset wins for them. So another thing that I want to touch on, we talked about it at the top, I was really surprised at how tight the open division was. I mean, Eddie Egan was balling for El Camino Real early on in that game, then Fairfax just had a bit too much. Birmingham kept it close with Westchester before they pulled away. Crenshaw, they had a chance to win at the end of the game. 1 free throw was missed, could have sealed the deal for the Cougars. They go on to lose in overtime. I mean, every game was so crazy, and then Granada Hills, that one went down to the last minute as well, and they were able to pull off the upset. It's not usually like that. I mean, in football, we saw huge blowouts, not only in the first round, but also in the second round of the open division. Not in basketball. It's a little different.
Whole different animal. And looking at that Taft game, the fact that Taft scored just 4 points in the second quarter, something we haven't seen from them all season long. So something that, from Taft and Crenshaw really showing up, but ultimately in the overtime period where they needed it, and especially at the end of regulation, that missed free throw, you got to make those shots if you want to try and move on in the open division. That said, ECR, they put up more of a fight than I thought they would against Fairfax. They were leading 35-28 at the half. Eddie Egan, as you said, great performance, 20-plus points in that one. But you got to wonder, with these teams going down, like the Fairfaxes, the Tafts, with those kind of inconsistent performances, do you think that's going to catch up with them? I'm not sure, but not really looking like, say, an open division championship team right now.
To be fair to Dominic Winbush, he was fouled shooting a 3 with 2 seconds left in the game, and his team was down by 2. So he made 2 out of the 3. So without him, they wouldn't have even pushed it to overtime. If he had made 3, yeah, Crenshaw probably would have won the game. But, I mean, making 2 in that pressure spot, he made the first, missed the second. So all the pressure was on for the third one, and he ended up knocking that down. And I was just impressed with the 2 point guards in that game. Kihei Clark for Taft, obviously, and then for Crenshaw, Winbush, who, yeah, he might have missed one of those free throws at the end, but his team wouldn't have even been close without him. So I thought the open division was fantastic. And then the difference in that Taft-Crenshaw game, the Taft supporting cast was able to do just a little bit more in that overtime session, and that's why they were able to walk off with a win. But the open division was fantastic. We'll preview the 2 remaining games, or the 2 semifinal games, I should say, because then there's the championship, obviously. But great game. Division 1 takeaways, Keith. So Palisades, you look on Max Preps, they've won 9 games after that win over Dorsey.
Right.
And you think 9 games, this team is way too good to have only won 9. But, I mean, that's how they've played. I was so impressed with them against Dorsey. They have a system, and they use it perfectly. They were knocking down their threes. Nick Kerkorian in that game had 7 3-pointers.
Wow.
And I think, if he was able to do that all season, I'm sure Palisades would have won more than 9 games. So it's just so surprising. I mean, we each picked Dorsey, and you had Dorsey maybe even winning another round. didn't really think much of Palisades. And I mean, can you blame us? To be totally honest, they were
That's
fourth
true.
in the Western League, or fifth in the Western League. Excuse me. Venice finished above them, and so did University, and then Fairfax and Westchester. Obviously, they had 8 wins going into the playoffs. So just on paper, it didn't look like a team that was going to be able to go on the road and get a win. And what happens? They do. They played a near perfect game. I was so impressed with what they were able to do, and I think I'm not going to pick them to win against View Park, but I think they're going to give them a hell of a game.
The 3 is the great equalizer in basketball for a reason. The fact that you can be undersized, you can be overmatched physically, but if you're able to hit that outside shot, you're in every single game. And we saw that so many threes hit from the outside, and against a bigger team like Dorset, we talked about in the last podcast, if you're able to hit that outside shot, you can really compete against these bigger squads because they simply just can't touch the outside shot.
And then Fremont won. Venice won, so they'll play each other. I think Fremont has a good chance to win that game. View Park, Pally on the other side of the bracket.
Yep.
George Washington Prep, Gardena play each other for a third time, and when you play a team a third time, it's tough to sweep. So George Washington Prep has won twice, close over Gardena. I think that could be kind of a tough game for them. I'm going to stick with my original pick, which was George Washington Prep, but I wouldn't be surprised if Gardena came away with a victory.
Here's the thing about George Washington Prep. As we said it all podcast long, the fact that they don't have the size. Gardena has multiple guys 6'5" and above. They bring a lot of size down low, but we saw it in those 2 games that they couldn't bring it together as a team. There was a lot of fouls, a lot of poor play down low, and George Washington Prep was able to get a lot of Gardena turnovers to go their way, play in transition. Looking at George Washington Prep, what they've been able to do in the playoffs thus far, a 100-point win.
Yeah, against Pauley, that was great.
I think the only 100-point performance in the playoffs thus far against Pauley. Obviously, Pauley not the greatest of teams.
Still, 100 spots impressive.
Very impressive. So clearly their guards are starting to click at the right time. I see them winning pretty handily, actually, over Gardena. Remains to be seen, though. It will be at George Washington Prep. They'll have the home court advantage. Who knows? But I'm liking what I see from them. Pally, very dangerous as well. But View Park also a very good team.
And then the other game in D1, University against Carson. University will host that one. I don't think Carson will give University too much trouble, and that will set up a great game. I mean, if View Park's able to take care of business against Palisades, that sets up a great 1-4 matchup, View Park University. Division 2, King Drew, the 1 seed. There was some confusion on Max Preps.
Right.
At first, it looked like the 16 seed beat them, but the score was put in wrong, so King Drew moves on. Marshall on the other side of the bracket, they won. Garfield, the 4 seed, won. I was at the Grant game against Roosevelt, and Grant came out hot. They were firing on all cylinders. I thought they played a fantastic first half, and then in the second half, Roosevelt came back. They got to as close as 4 against Grant, but then Grant was able to finish them out. I think Grant at King Drew is going to be very close, and I would not be surprised if Grant walked away with a victory, an upset victory, because they can score. And I know King Drew, they play excellent defense, but I don't know if they can score as much as Grant can.
I completely agree with you. One name that we have to shout out, Antonio Tidwell.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Huge game. Not just 12 rebounds, 3 steals, but 26 points in that whole Grant squad. A very balanced attack offensively. 5 players with 6 points or more in that one. And as you said, great first half, holding the Rough Riders to just 19 points, meanwhile scoring 38. So basically double amount of points that Roosevelt had. Watch out for them, and also look out for that Garfield-Marshall game, because Marshall, they're coming in as the top team. But Garfield had great performance in the first half. Obviously not a great team win necessarily
against Cleveland,
yes,
but
yeah.
Hey, you go up with who you go up against, and I mean, I know there was some talk. People were upset that Verdugo Hills didn't get in when Cleveland got in when they didn't win a league game. Teams can't control that. That's all about the committee. And so, Garfield, they beat Cleveland. That's who they were matched up against, and now they have a chance against the second-best team in the division, and I think that's going to be a great game, a game you might be at, Keith, right?
Yes, indeed. It will be at Sotomayor High School, so no home court advantage for Marshall. I mean, it's kind of in Marshall's backyard over there along the 5 and the 110, but we'll see how the crowds come out to support, Garfield in East LA, but it's not necessarily a home game for either team.
And then the other game that we haven't mentioned in that one, Van Nuys moved on, and it was a little closer than I think they probably would have wanted, but they ended up squeaking out a win, so they moved on as well. No upsets in Division 2, no upsets in Division 3, but then in Division 4, number 12 Jefferson beat number 5 New Charter West, so Jefferson advances in Division 4, and then no upsets in Division 5. So really, the open division, I mean, we were very close to 3 big-time upsets. Yeah. We got 1, And it just wasn't like that in any of the other divisions. I think that goes to show the top 1 through 8 in LA is as close as anywhere.
Absolutely. They're so talented. I mean, that West Valley League, we had trouble even on the podcast distinguishing who was better than who. Clearly, top teams in the section.
Let's move on now to the game ball segment where we highlight some of the top players in the LA City section from the past week. So, Keith, we usually start with you. Mine is from the Open Division. It's a player on Taft. Who do you have?
I have a guy from D3. We mentioned him earlier. The freshman Travis Dowdell from Manual Arts. As I said, 11 points on the night. 2 rebounds, 4 assists, and 7 steals. He was a defensive dynamo in that game.
Against who?
Against Animo de la Hoya. And so they had a great win in that one. 75-54, exactly for that reason. They had 4 double-digit scores in that game. So Travis Dowdell, you get a game ball from me.
On my side, I have to give it to a player from Taft. It was Brandon Wilson, who was held scoreless at halftime against Crenshaw, had no points at the break, and then scored 19 in the second half and overtime to help Kihei Clark and company get a win over Crenshaw. We were waiting and wondering which role players for Taft were going to help out Kihei Clark, and in this game, you know, there were other players who really helped, but Brandon Wilson, I thought, was the best of the bunch for Taft in that game after Clark, so he gets a game ball from me. Thought he had a great game. All right, everyone's favorite time of the week where we pick games. This can get pretty contentious. It can get kind of crazy. This is what people remember when we go to the games and the teams we pick lose and the other team gets mad. So it's great. This is great fun that we have here. Let's start in the Open Division. Westchester against Granada. Keith, don't tell me you're going with Granada. You think the run's going to continue?
I'm going to have to go with Granada Hills, and here's why. You look at the system. It's worked thus far. They beat a Narbonne team that we thought was unbeatable, and they were able to get a huge win. 4 points, albeit, still a win in the Open Division. You got to wonder if that computer was up to something. I think they have the momentum right now. I'm going with the upset. Westchester, obviously the best team throughout the section all year long, but I think it's playoff time. I think some magic happens there with Granada Hills.
Not so fast. And I know what the Granada Hills people are thinking. Oh, not this guy again. Why does he always pick against us? Why does he hate us? I don't hate you. I respect you, and I think you're having a great season. But here's my rationale for picking Westchester over Granada. So Granada played Taft twice in the league, and Taft was better than Narbonne by a nose. That's why they got the 3 seed. And Taft beat Granada both of those times, home and away. Westchester is better than Taft, so I think exactly. Right? So I think that Westchester will win. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a 2-point game. I wouldn't be surprised if Granada Hills won the way that they're playing right now. But I can't pick against Edizam and Westchester. The history, how they're doing this season. I know they're without Jordan Brinson. My sources are telling me he's going to be out for 2 weeks. It will be a game-time decision for the city championship if Westchester wins. So that's huge for Granada. Right. That opens a door for them. But I still think that Westchester with Kalen Allen, Mo Tutt, Kevin Bethel, Sally Hudson, it's a loaded roster. And I know I sound like a broken record because that's what I said against Narbonne. You know, I feel how I feel. So I'm sorry, Granada people, but I have Westchester in that game. You've had a great season, and if it continues, you know, maybe I'll wear a Granada hat next week or something like that. Next game, the other one in the Open Division. So that was the late game. The earlier game, Keith, is Fairfax against Taft. How do you see that one playing out?
I'm going to have to go with Taft in this one, actually.
Oh, wow. You're going with all the upsets.
All the upsets on this week, folks. And here's why. Taft, we saw a great performance off their bench, and we've seen these supplementary guys really come to the forefront. I think it's kind of a gambler's fallacy, the fact that they were almost upset by Crenshaw, even though I had Crenshaw going all the way. The fact that I don't think you could have 2
Wait, you had Crenshaw? You didn't have Crenshaw going all the way. You just had them beating Taft,
that's
though,
right?
Gotcha, okay.
Beating Taft. But, you know, going all the way to championship.
Gotcha.
But, you know, it's a gambler's fallacy, but I think that's what I'm going to roll with this week. The fact that you can't have 2 bad games in a row, because Taft, having a 4-point quarter, that is not what their team is at all. Obviously, they were able to come through in overtime, but I think that they have more consistency in this game. I think Clark has a great game, and I think, once again, we see their bench come alive, and I see them getting the W over Fairfax. I think Fairfax letting up, you know, because Crenshaw, I believe, is a better team than ECR. So having, you know, Fairfax go down at the half to ECR, I don't know. I don't think they're really the real deal.
Wow. All right. I'm taking Fairfax. I'm going to disagree. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Kirk Smith is the difference in this game. He's a traditional, true big man for Fairfax. Taft does not have a true traditional big man, so that's why I like Fairfax. Another reason, I mean, 2 is better than 1, and Taft has 1 extraordinary guard. Fairfax has 2, and Jamal Hartwell and Ethan Anderson. So again, I just think Fairfax is a little deeper. They're more experienced as well. Taft relies on a lot of sophomores. Not that that's a bad thing, but right. in this game, Fairfax, they have a lot of guys who've been around. I think Steve Bake is an excellent coach. Again, not that Derek Taylor isn't, but he has a lot of experience. He went 35-0 with Lonzo Ball. He knows how to handle the big moment. I'm taking Fairfax in that game. So there are our open division picks. Let's move on to a Division I game, Palisades at View Park.
Gonna have to go with Palisades. I think live by the 3, you gotta die by
another upset. You're on a tear here.
Here's the thing, though. After they upset Dorsey, we saw what this team is capable of. We saw that maybe their league was just too loaded. Maybe they underperformed in league. But now this is playoff time, and I think that the momentum. There's something about momentum. Granada Hills, on paper, they should not have beaten Arbonne, but somehow they did. And I think it's the same thing for Palisades. It's about the scheme. If they're able to hit the outside shot, then they'll be able to go far. It's a big if, though. It's a big if because sometimes you have guys that are streaky shooters. They're just not hitting. It's just a bad shooting night. So I think that Palisades, I think they will hit the 3, and I think they'll ultimately pull out a very, very narrow win.
Palisades guard Nick Kerkorian told me don't pick against us again. Nick, I'm sorry, but I'm picking against you again. And it all comes back to what I said earlier. Palisades has won 9 games this year. There has to be some regression to the mean. They're not going to play another perfect game, I don't think, because they haven't showed us that they can do that all season. Against Dorsey, it was beautiful what they were doing. I mean, Dorsey would give them a second chance on the rare occasion they did make a mistake, and every time they make them pay. I'm not sure View Park's going to allow that to happen as much. I thought Dorsey made quite a few errors in that game. And again, take nothing away from Palisades. They played perfect basketball nearly, but I didn't think Dorsey was even close to that level, and I think View Park's going to be a little bit better. They're the 1 seed. I just think in the playoffs, going on the road, winning back-to-back games is really, really challenging, especially when you haven't won that many games on the season. So give me View Park in that game. Again, I'm being the Grinch right now. No upsets for me so far, but hold on one sec because we're going to pick Grant, the 8 seed, against King Drew, the 1 seed in Division II. Keith?
Gonna go with Grant.
So 4 for 4 on the upsets. You're a madman.
Here's the thing. I was inspired by Alex Garr. Alex Garr had the 4 for 4 this week in the Open Division.
Yeah, but he only picked 1 upset.
I know he only picked up 1 upset, but that was such a bold prediction that I was just inspired. So I'm gonna have to go.
And
with
Grant. You're going against the bracket from a couple weeks ago as well. You're kind of all over the place. You're having a lot of changes of heart here.
If basketball was a science, they would teach it in schools. But you know what? You gotta go with the momentum. You gotta go with what's hot right now. Same thing with with the coaches. If a guy is shooting hot, you got to go with him. You got to go with the hot hand. Right now, I see a lot of potential from Grant. I don't know if King Drew, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, their offense really isn't as good as that Grant offense is. So you got to wonder, will their defense be able to hold Grant to lower scores? If so, I think they can get a win by a little. But if Grant goes off, it's their game.
Yeah, and you're kind of stealing my thunder a little bit. I have Grant. I think. Because of what I said earlier, I agree with you. Grant can score, King Drew can't, and I know they're really good on defense, and they have some interior players who might give Grant some trouble, but I don't know. I'm just feeling the upset in that game. I think King Drew will struggle offensively because Grant, they do play good defense as well, but they can score. Antonio Tidwell can score. They have a bunch of players who can hit threes, so I'm taking Grant in Division II. All right, Keith, you're going to have to answer to a lot of people next week if these upsets don't happen, and if they do, then I'm going to have to answer to a lot of people.
Exactly.
But that's been the Week 2 Playoff Basketball Podcast brought to you by Jersey Mike's. We'll see what happens, man. I guess we're differentiating on so much. Anything can happen, and that's what the playoffs are all about. For Keith DeMolder, I'm Connor Morris. We'll see you next time.